Howdy, folks. Happy Friday. Thank God it's Friday. It's cold and rainy in Buffalo, but it's December, so what the hell do you expect? We'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
So one of the big free agents came off the market in baseball, Brandon Nimmo. But it's interesting because if you'd have told me he'd have gotten 162 million, I would have been like, no way. He's getting like 125, 130, something like that. But as the market kept increasing for other players, his value kept increasing. But what also was increasing was the intrinsic value of him to fans. So Met fans had already lost Jacob deGrom, who was a homegrown guy. And, they didn't feel great about it. But then after the press conference, they got mad at him. It's like, I was fine with deGrom's press conference. I thought everything he said was fine. I don't know what people expect. But then Brandon Nimmo's, future was still up for grabs. And he's a guy also that's a homegrown guy that they had drafted in the first round years ago. And so my feeling is, like, even the Mets probably saw this, that they couldn't lose deGrom and Nimmo without the fan base really, really being upset and possibly not showing up at the ballpark or, to see if they're, until they see if they're good or not. So I think Brandon Nimmo got overpaid. And he's a really good player. Don't get me wrong. Everybody gets overpaid to a degree, but I think he got overpaid because of his popularity in the fan base, because he's now the most popular Met. And it's just interesting how that kind of has worked out.
Well, Kev, I'll say this because, boy, everybody has just gone to the nth degree to sort of make a comparison. Like I saw the TSN crew yesterday. Well, if Aaron Judge gets 40 million, what should Connor McDavid? They're always trying to make these connections with like other sports when I think that's completely ass backwards. But part of that Judge contract, well, I'd say a year or two and about maybe $10 million a year was the importance of Judge to the Yankees as a homegrown guy, not only the MVP, but, bigger than life, right fielder, homegrown guy, all rise, all that stuff. And they could maybe afford to lose him as a player. They couldn't afford to lose him as an icon and as a fan favorite.
Yeah, I completely agree. The Yankees always have, Ruth, Mantle, Jeter. They have to have the prize. And Aaron Judge is it. He fits. He fits into the Mantle, Babe Ruth, Jeter kind of aura that just kind of transcends the game and sort of fits with the kind of New York attitude as well. So, yeah, and, I don't mind when the media draws comparison as long as they put it in perspective. Baseball is just a bigger revenue sport than hockey, and we have a salary cap as well. But if you said to me that Matthews has a chance to be the first guy to take that cap to the limit on the individual cap, I'd say yeah, absolutely. Why not?
And Russ, the one thing that you could compare Judge and Nimmo to, both of them have proved that they could play at a high level in New York. And that whenever these teams add a player in free agency, there's always that 1 to 2 year questioning of whether they can handle the pressure of the New York media and all that. They thought that about Cole. They thought that about other players. Ed Whitson back in the day and all these guys who choked under the pressure of New York. Judge came up as a Yankee. Nimmo came up as a Met. They've handled that throughout their entire career. That is worth its weight in gold to both of these guys.
Yeah, the expectation is what you're going to get out of them, and that's a big deal. The other thing with Judge, though, don't underestimate the Derek Jeter 3,000 baseballs and the Aaron Judge 62 homer baseballs that will be sold every day at the gift shop for the next 10 years, too.
Yeah.
I did want to, since we're on the subject of drawing baseball contracts into our sport, there's another important one as well, which is Xander Bogaerts signing and leaving Boston. Now, the Red Sox, it appears to me, and certainly I'm not a baseball insider as much as I love the game, but I think they miscalculated the market there, and they let a player get away that they really did not want to lose.
Yeah.
And I know the fan base in Boston now, and some of the writers are saying the Bruins cannot make the same mistake with Pasternak. They cannot miscalculate the marketplace and think.
Right. They can't have two teams be that screwed up because I agree.
Yeah, and Russ, I think it's Russ that said it, or Mike both, that he needs to be a $10 million player. I don't know if it's 10 million, but it's in that range. For sure. And maybe it's
they had the Thornton screw up too back in the day.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe it'll be one of these things. Like to me, kind of the new thing is giving those guys their 10 million in the first few years, and then gradually going down a little bit, so it's front loaded. But then they're $10 million players, although their AAV is not that interesting. But I think that's that was an important thing to happen for the Bruins to give a reminder of, you don't screw this up. Like if you're going to rebuild this team, Pasternak should be a big part of it.
Well, the Bogarts thing. Apparently, the Red Sox offer was like around 180 million. The Padres offered over 100 million more, but they spread it out. I think it was 11 years, so they spread out the AAV over a longer thing. Now that we know in hockey that we're going to have contracts. I mean, 8 years is the max, but that is the way that some of these teams are going to be able to keep. Like, for example, and then we'll start the show. Michael Bunting. The talk about it early in the year was that the Leafs were going to sign Michael Bunting to an 8-year contract. Not that he's like, important Matthews or Nylander or Marner, but he's important. But he wants to stay in Toronto, and to spread the AAV out longer, they would sign him to an 8-year deal, and then maybe the cap would be around $4 million, like Nick Paul did in Tampa. That is the way of the world in the NHL. Yeah. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm really surprised we haven't seen more of it already, honestly.
Yeah, but we're going to see it, don't you think?
We are going to see it, yeah, we are. But it felt like this should have started happening like 3 or 4 years ago. Like I kept waiting for this,
don't you think it's the risk? Because it is problematic if you get to the end and you're still paying that hit, even though you knew this was coming, and they're not the player, and then they retire.
Well, it's a combination, right? It is a risk,
yeah,
but it's also the player. Like what player is going to say, well, I'm pretty good. Michael Bunting, he was like rookie of the year, type year. So he's going to sit there and say, you know what, I'm going to just take $4 million into the next 8 years and go with it. Like that's the other thing, like that. If I'm a player, I'm like, that's wonderful. I mean, they're making Michael Bunting. Did ever think he would make $32 million?
No, and I mean, he came to Toronto because he's from Scarborough. He came to Toronto because he played for Dubas and Keith and Sault Ste. Marie. B, there was opportunity, and he hustled his way into playing with Matthews and Nylander. And now I think you watched that game last night, and the stuff, he's a spark plug like a Brendan Gallagher, like he's not as good a player as Gallagher or Marchand, but he provides that, a team that's not physical and a team that sometimes doesn't have a lot of a pulse. Bunting is a heartbeat of that team.
Yeah, well, we usually see enough for even $3 million for 8 years. $3 million a year for 8 years, like that kind of thing.
Colton Sissons with
if you're just, but that's a player willing to admit that he's never going to be like that superstar. But that's hard to get players to admit to sometimes.
No, you're right, Eck. You're right on that.
It's like if you're an agent, you're sitting there saying, you know what, man, this is like $3 million, $24 million for 8 years. $3 million is pretty good.
Well, but this is always a good argument simply because, like I heard on Sirius yesterday, they were like, well, look, if Tage Thompson would have waited, he could be like a $10 or $11 million player now. Except somebody gives you $57 million, you're usually going to take it.
Yeah, it's all relative, yeah.
And you know who's Tage Thompson's biggest fan right now? Austin Matthews. Because they've known each other since they played in the U.S. developmental program. They're both from the Arizona area. Yeah. There was an interview back in September, and Steve Dangle asked Matthews, who's the most underrated player in the NHL? And he said Tage Thompson. And then yesterday he was asked about Tage Thompson's 5 goals, and he said, I completely expected it. He's a great player. So it's like, he knew, and it's
someone down there, like I said before, someone down there in Arizona is teaching that change shot.
Did we find out yet? Because I don't know the answer. I should, but I don't.
I don't know the answer either.
How much has he played? Did he play in Arizona?
Well, he plays in the summers in Arizona because he practices.
Was he developed there, or did he move?
I don't
east
believe
to
he
the
I,
other?
don't believe, I think he was developed in the St.
Yeah.
Louis area.
Yeah, I don't think he was either, but I didn't really know for sure. So
It's interesting.
Yeah.
All right, let's do this. Hello, Hockey World. It is Friday, December 9th, 2022.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm going to start the show with just an interesting stat.
And I'm Eklund, and I'm going to let Kevin do that right now. Go.
Yeah. Well, I talked to the guys before the show about this.
Yeah.
I've been working on a piece that I actually wrote this morning about the increase in goal scoring, and so I've been following. Hockey Reference has the best way to follow that. Is you just Google NHLaverages.com, and they have a run of the yearly averages and everything. So it's real easy to follow. And since I didn't know when I was going to write it, whether I was going to write it yesterday or 2 days ago, I've had to look every day for the last week where it was at. And last night, the average NHL goals against average stood at 299 going into last night's games. This morning, when I wrote the story and I called it up, it went to 301. It has not been above 3 since 95, 96.
Ooh.
So the save percentage is now down to 904. Hasn't been that low in 16 years.
Yeah, see, that's where I was picking up on, Kev, because I have to come up with subjects all the time when I go on Sirius because it's like my spot. And so this week I had noticed, boy, there's not that many elite goalies right now. And I did search out everybody's save percentages. And what I found out is there's only like 4 or 5 guys really performing at a high level for save percentage. And I noticed it was down, but I didn't know what the average was.
Yeah.
Well, let me give you one more crazy fact. There are 12 teams in this league whose save percentage is below 900 for the both teams, and 14 who are 900 or below. So essentially half the league now has save percentage, a team save percentage. And it really speaks to why scoring is up. Like it's up to now 6.4 goals per game, 3.2 goals. And again, you got to go back almost 30 years to see that level of scoring. And, I've been asking a bunch of people about it, and I've read stories about it. And I think that what people are saying is right, is there is no real answer why it's happening. It's a variety of factors.
Right.
Number one is that the crackdown on obstruction has played a role. Number two, defenses have had a harder time adjusting to the speed than they thought they would, which is creating more openings. 3, goalies were just in a down cycle. We've lost Rene, we lost Rask, we lost Carey Price, we lost Lundqvist. We really haven't replaced those guys, and some of the younger guys.
I don't buy that one.
Yeah, Thatcher Demko again. We're counting on him this year. He got injured a little bit. Spencer Knight, we still expect he's going to be good.
Yeah.
But he hasn't started all their games, so he's not quite in the cycle yet, and all that kind of stuff. And then finally, the scorers are have figured it all out. They've all sorted out. It's like 4 or 5, and 5 or 6 reasons, and they've kind of all combined to have the kind of a perfect storm where we have.
Let's try to play that out for a second, though. Because I think that's a wimpy way of going, right? Go ahead, Mike. You can go first.
I was going to say, let me just bring this up quickly because I'm looking at Cap Friendly and the top 18 salaried goaltenders this year. And of the top 18, 1 will never play again, Carey Price. There are only, let's see here, with it over a 910 save percentage. So that's above average right now. Matt Murray at 933. Connor Hellebuyck at 932, Shesterkin at 913, Kemper at 916, Linus Ullmark at 939. Those are the only ones in the top 18 salaries that are above average. So you're talking about goaltenders like Bobrovsky making $10 million and he's below average. I mean, Vasilevsky's 909. I'll take him. If you don't want him, I'll take him on my team. But the point is that right now, is it the fact that it's just more wide open offense, like you're saying, Kev? Is it the fact that all of a sudden we're back to 1993 and it's, you're going to have players with career, all have career years? I don't know. I'd love to think that the NHL is sort of morphing into a more offensive league. I think as the year goes longer, they're going to start playing playoff hockey more, and the numbers will go down.
It'll go down. It'll go down a little bit, although we said that last year too, and it still held.
Yeah,
it held for most of the season. It only dropped a little bit in March and April. So it is interesting. But what do you want to do with it now?
Okay, so here's the thing. Well, first of all, I don't like when people say it's a little bit of everything, because I think that's obvious, right? That's always the case, correct? So I think that we need to come up with what it's the mostly of, and I'm going to throw this out there. I don't think we've ever had better goaltenders than we have in the NHL right now. Just as far as quality goes, as far as the overall skill set goes, we've lost Rene, we've lost Rest, but we've replaced them with Sorokin and Shesterkin, and I'll take those guys over those guys. We're looking at a time where Vasilevsky, Carter Hart, we talked about, but he's a great goalie and he's not playing on a good team, but there's great goalies, and even some other goalies that are out there that are just killing it right now. And think about this to yourself. We all watch a lot of hockey games. Obviously, it's our job. How many bad goals have you seen given up? Just when you say that's a bad goal.
About 5 or 6 of them in the Columbus Buffalo game.
I'd say one every
game. I would say every game there's.
Yeah,
there are some, but comparatively to the past, I think there are actually less bad, just flat out bad goals.
Well, I think goaltenders now, I mean, obviously with the advent of the butterfly, if you look at video from the 80s and watch goaltenders who are stand-up goalies who just wave their feet at a puck going by them, or they're smaller, or their equipment is not as good. That's the reason why goaltenders are better now. They're equipped better, they're coached better. But
they're coached at all. Some of them weren't even coached back then.
Right, true.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of I think it's two-pronged. I think it's the NFLization of the NHL in the sense that it's tougher to play defense now more than ever because of, no bear hug rule. You can't, the interference rules, the can opener, all these things that defensemen used to do that they can't do. And I also think, Kev, defensemen are jumping more into the offense. It's you had a few defensemen back in the day who were part of the offensive attack. Now almost every defenseman is part of the offensive attack.
Yeah, no, I think it's and the speed has a lot to do with it. It's harder to defend against. I have had people tell me, and I did see it also talked about on ESPN about the fact that we're in a period when the modern goaltending is mature enough that all the current players have watched that system, have grown up with it, and they've kind of figured it out. I mean, they kind of know when goalies go down now, and they count on that. And it's those little subtle things which, they don't even know they're doing it, but they're coming over the line. I remember Mary Lemieux telling me one time that when he first got into the league, he said, you'd have your head looking for defenders. He said, and then you'd glance at your net, and if you saw any opening, which you often did, and he goes, I mean a small, postal slot size thing. He said, you fired the puck.
Yeah.
And as goalies got bigger, he said, you'd look up, you didn't see anything, so they wouldn't be there. And I think that the modern players now, as Mike said, and he's right, oftentimes shooters are confronted with goalies on their knees now, and they've kind of got that sort of figured out. They don't, they may not verbalize it there, but that's what I heard them discuss on ESPN, just in terms of the guys know now. They shoot high at certain times, just because they know, they figure at that point the goalie's going to be on his knees.
I'll give you 2 things in this before I run out of time. One thing is I heard a player say it the other day, I can't remember if it was to me or who it was, that now they're shooting for a spot on the goalie, looking for a rebound, not even looking for a goal anymore.
Right.
100%.
They're just looking for that to rebound to happen so there's a teammate there and they can get a goal, because it has become hard to score on a lot of goalies. But the other thing is it's also become very hard to hold on to more than 3 really solid defensemen in this league. You can't build a defense through free agency. And if you don't draft and develop right with defense, it takes 4 to 5 years for most. I think a lot of teams have run out of defensemen. And I've seen it, and there's definitely a shortage there. You could see, like, the Mark Stones in this league shouldn't be playing anymore.
Well, I'll tell you this, Russ. I think you're right.
Mike Stone.
Right. We're paying offensive defensemen and not paying defensive defensemen in the NHL.
Well, they don't want to produce defensive defensemen. There's still some, but that's another thing that is happening before they get up. Is everybody's so offensive? There's only a few defensive defensemen in every draft.
Because
they don't want to draft them. Yeah, they don't want to draft them. Yeah. They want to acquire them at the trade deadline.
Right. We'll find a way to get a defensive defenseman. Everybody always says that. We can get that guy, but they really can't. Like, those guys don't really, because we're in a cyclical pattern where for a while we didn't have enough offensive defensemen, so all defensemen were playing. We're becoming offensive defensemen. All the kids, were like. They were doing that. Everybody wants to be.
There was a guy in last year's draft, Liam Bischel. He was the defensive defenseman in the draft, and he was a commodity as a result.
Yeah,
right.
We are going to see that.
And the defensive defenseman now. I mean, okay, 20 years ago, 25, it was guys like Phil Russell and Rod Langway, and they were not very. Langway was okay, but most of the defensive defensemen were guys who were not very mobile.
I'll tell you, he wasn't.
That's 40 years ago, Mike. By the way,
I'm trying to sprinkle it throughout the ages, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, go ahead.
The one thing that kind of flies in the face of, because I've seen that argument too, that guys now are just sort of firing it at the front of the net, is the fact that what do you think shots are now compared to where they were?
I mean, shots that get through or shots attempted?
Shots on net.
Shots on net are down because guys are blocking all over.
Shots on net are exactly the same.
Wow.
Yeah. But shot blocks are up, which means shot attempts are higher, Kevin.
Yeah, attempts are higher, but that they're not getting through. So my point is that if you're shooting to try to get a rebound and everything, you haven't been very successful because you're still getting the same number of shots, on goal as you had, 10 years ago. So,
and you'll see every game, you'll see 2 or 3 point shots that are not designed to be shots at all. That are shots that are looking for some kind of deflection.
Well, the shot pass, you see that a lot now.
And I'll throw this out there too. Another thing about why I think this is the hardest era ever to be a goalie, and I think that we have some great goalies and really good points in the butterfly thing too. And I do think that has something to do, Kevin, with like the why some of the Russian goalies are maybe a little bit more successful, because they do play a slightly different style than North American goalies, and that could play into it a little bit. But we have never had an era like when I was growing up playing and I was in goalie camp and stuff like that. There was a thing you used to be able to do. You would yell screen. If you were being screened, the goalie would your job was to yell screen. I'm being screened, yell screen, and that was what I grew up doing. So when I played hockey a couple years ago, with the US, with the media and the Flyers media and stuff like that, I'm in goal and I'm yelling screen. Look at them. They turn around at me, and these younger kids, they turn around at me, look like I'm nuts. I'm like, what do you mean nuts? We're going to block the shots. I'm like, but I can't see the shot because you're trying to block the shot. So I'm amazed. I'm like absolutely astonished sometimes when players try to block shots and it gets through and goalies make these glove saves when they could not have seen it. Like it's astonishing to me. Like you can't.
Sometimes it just hits the glove.
Well, part of it is positioning is better now, and your things are where they probably will get hit. But man, I when I played, I had a really hard time dealing with shots from the point. And what am I going to do? I don't have any idea where the shot's going. Like I have no idea. Because you're going down in front to block the shot,
especially during the playoffs. I mean, there are guys like, I mean, back in the day, like Jim Schoenfeld used to slide in front of shots all the time. He tried to block every shot, and and guys like Craig Ludwig with the big shin pads, he prided himself on blocking as many shots as possible. Now in the playoffs, everybody's a shot blocker. The forwards, the defensemen, everybody's goes in that zone around in front of the goaltender, and everybody's trying to block shots. Everyone.
But here's my take now. I think we're now blocking in the regular season like we used to block in the playoffs.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I see it in Detroit where, they've gotten guys hurt from blocking shots so frequently. I mean, they're in the top 10 now in terms of shot blocking, and because of that, they keep breaking bones.
Flyers doing the same thing. I mean, Tortorella obviously has them blocking shots left and right. The Flyers are number 2 I think in shot blocking, which is not helping them. But they're sitting back in there. It's one thing to block shots and win games, another thing to block shots and lose games. And those defensemen are just beat the hell up, and they really, you really can see it. Like,
well,
Yeah.
you watched that Toronto Dallas game on Tuesday, and
tons.
the 5-on-3 in the second period. And, Mitch Marner is like most of these skilled forwards who wears the short gloves so they have more flexibility with the wrist to pass. And, he loses his stick and he's blocking shots with his hands out. And I could just see like a shot going off of his hand and him being out for 6 weeks with a broken metacarpal or something like that. That's the thing. It's great to have skilled players killing penalties, and he's excellent at it. But you could lose somebody who's extremely important to your team because of the equipment that they wear. They don't wear the shot.
We see it every year. We see it every year, and it's not even about equipment. Sometimes it's just about
It's something that's a 100-mile-an-hour shot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, don't write though that it may not be a good strategy to block all the shots because of injuries, because you'll be besieged by. We wrote it at our website. Just asking the question of whether or not, is there a trade-off here? Is it worth the? They lost Bertuzzi. They've lost more than one guy with shot blocking. Zadina's out, for extended period. And people just, they just think that's the way to go now. That they were not pleased with the story. So
let's do this research. Let's do this research at some point. I'm curious about this. What with the top shot blocking teams each year? How far are they going in the playoffs? Like in the regular season shot blocking, because that'll be an interesting thing to find out, because Tortorella hasn't had much success in the playoffs.
Well, we could do last year's right now. I'm sure Mike can call it up right now. We'll just
Mike, bring it up.
I think that's a real interesting subject. Yeah,
because I think that it has to. We're human beings. At some point, it takes a toll, right? It just takes. There's not no matter what you say, it's going to take a toll. And what happened to trusting your goalie a little bit? If a shot's coming from the point and a goalie can see it in the NHL, he should be able to stop it. So why are we trying to block shots from out there? Why are we trying to pick off shots from out there all the time? I know there's instead pick up the deflections. Pick up who's possibly getting the deflections. Pick up who can get the rebounds. The goalie should be able to stop anything from the point.
Well,
but the problem is they're flooding the. There's everybody's going to the net. So much congestion in there.
Yeah, but it's twice as much if your players are in there too.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I'll look for 2020, 21, 22, but here for this season right now.
No, that doesn't help us.
Yeah, we need to know where the playoffs are. We need.
All right.
Yes,
let me see
next year we can, because to me, I want to see what happens in the playoffs and when this eventually takes a toll, because I think it eventually takes a toll, and I think, in many ways, it could be you have a couple defensemen that miss a whole bunch of games because of it, or a forward who misses a game because of it, and it's like. Look, when I look at Mitch Marner, it's a perfect example, Mike. Why do you have Mitch Marner blocking shots?
He's not there to block shots. In that instance, on a 5-on-3 after he broke his stick,
I saw it. I was watching it.
Yeah, but
it was a 5-on-2, and it was kind of fun. It's it becomes a fun. But he made some great. Put his hand on the ice at one point and block something.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was saying it was just not.
But that's not worth it, man. It's not worth. Give the Stars that goal if you're going to lose Mitch Marner for 6 weeks. It's this is just, I don't understand the trade-off there. I don't understand that philosophy completely. And I know, Kevin, I've talked to you about it. I've fought with people about it, and they just say, oh, shot blocking, that's the way to win. It's the way to win. It's the way to win.
Yeah, they do. And they get angry over it. So.
Oh, they do. And because it's a hard sell. They have to back this up because they're telling their players to do this. And this is not an easy sell. Don't think it doesn't hurt to block shots. These guys have to be committed to it. They have to believe that it's going to work. They have to believe it's going to win them games, or else you're not doing it.
Yeah,
it's painful.
Well, we see a lot of people on the Red Wings who were not shot blockers now blocking shots. So
yeah.
So.
You used to see it. I remember it used to be a big deal. Way back in the day, if someone actually slid across and blocked a shot, it was like a thing. It was a thing, on a power play or something like that. Like a forward put his neck out. But now, no, it's like
the problem is the shots are so much harder too.
Oh yeah.
You used to have only a couple or 3 or 4 guys that could really hammer the puck. Now everybody hammers the puck.
Everyone's around 100 miles an hour pretty much, and it's like And I do think that when while Mike finds the stats, I do think that the skill of the forwards is higher than ever before. And if I'm going to talk about scoring, I think that's. I mean, we live.
Yeah, no, it's for sure. I mean, goalies today are better, more talented, but I don't know that they've. I mean, I think this is just kind of a down year. We've had, guys that just aren't performing. I think the fact, and this is the point I think that people are making. Like, Markstrom is not the goalie that people thought he was going to be this year. Demko got hurt.
Yeah.
The goaltending in LA hasn't been as good as people thought.
Right.
Okay, I found it.
Okay, good. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, and it's not what you would think.
Okay.
Of the top 5 teams, this is regular season, 83 games.
Yeah.
Top 5 teams that had the most block shots, none of them were playoff teams.
Okay.
San Jose was number 1 at 16.7.
Okay.
Vegas at 15.9.
Right.
Chicago 15.8. The Islanders 15.06 and the Flyers 15.05. The first playoff team that in terms the highest ranked team on the list that made the playoffs was the Dallas Stars, and they were out in 1 round. The New York Rangers.
And what number were they?
The New York Rangers are the only team in the top 10 other than Dallas that blocked shots, and they did that. Yeah, obviously they did that a lot because of Shesterkin, but Shesterkin still faced a ton of shots and a lot of chances.
Yeah, and the Rangers also got to the playoffs despite a lot of injuries. Like they really were, they were getting hurt left and right. If you remember, like they were going down. Like Colorado stayed pretty healthy last year. What were their shot block totals?
They're 20th.
All right.
13.22 block shots per game. Tampa was 22nd at 12.73.
All right. So, I mean, think about that. Like, that's like that. So the top 2 teams are in the 20s. The teams who make it to the Stanley Cup Finals are in the 20s.
But
they also, yeah.
But those aren't playoff totals. That's the thing.
No, I know. I'm talking about
they could have very easily changed their what they did in the playoffs.
Right, and also those teams, don't give up many shots. Tampa Bay, there's not many shots.
Well, the best offense, Pepsi sends good offense. We know that, right? That's
who had the least amount of shot blocks per game last year? It was a playoff team and a team with a very good defensive core.
Carolina.
Yeah. 10.46 blocks per game. And you could say the reason that was the case is because their defense was so good. They didn't have to block shots.
So someone needs to call Rod Brindamore. Someone needs to call Rod Brindamore and talk to him about that. That to me is like, that's an interesting one because he was a shot blocker as a forward, as a player.
Yeah.
The bottom 5 teams in this list, Carolina, Buffalo Sabres, that's an outlier. Calgary was one of the top teams in the West. Toronto had the 3rd or 4th best record in the NHL, and Florida, who was the President's Trophy winner. So
it's fascinating. I mean, so I'm talking about. I mean, in the playoffs, I'm all for shot blocking. Anything goes, right? Playoffs are survival. We get that. It's always has been. Like Kevin says, what we have now is what we used to have in the playoffs, and I agree with that.
Yeah,
I think it's done. But what we're doing in the regular season. Let's talk to those people again and tell them, are you sure this works? Like, are you sure this makes sense? Because it really, it doesn't necessarily work. And and also I really think the other thing to do, and this I'm not going to make you do more research, Mike, because we'll do this another time. I'm going to do this for an article or something like that, is games lost, game numbers lost per injury per team on shot blocking. Like how are the top shot blockers, did they lose the most games? Games? And I think, when you gave me that top list of the top shot blockers, a lot of those teams did. Like Islanders definitely lost a lot of games.
Well, I mean, and players can still get hurt.
Sure.
But the thing is, like, I know for a fact that Toronto, a lot of their players wear the shot blocking guards on their skates, the plastic coverings on their skates, because there have been players who have blocked shots who broke a toe or broke a foot because they weren't wearing those. So if you're equipped, and that's the reason I was so concerned about Marner, is because Marner wears those real short gloves. If you're wearing gloves like a defenseman and those long ones that go all the way past your wrist, then you're protected. It doesn't say that if you get in front of a Ryan Pulock slap shot, which is 100 miles an hour, you can't break a finger. But
the only way to be protected, Mike, would be to have like equipment that doesn't have any flexibility in it at all, right? Like
right.
You can't have that. Like at some point, your knees have to bend, and there's going to be a spot where your padding is less because your knees have to, or your ankles have to be able to move a little bit. Like you can't make a skate so strong that the ankle can't move, because if you watch these guys, like not unlike us, who may have to tie up our skates really tight to be able to skate on the rink. Some of these guys barely tie their skates at all. Sometimes they have complete flexibility.
I mean, I think if you're going to do this, you have to take a really deep dive, because I would guess, and I could be wrong, but I don't think so, that the worst teams in the league are always going to be among the shot blockers, because they just give up so many shots.
Yes.
So, and if you're defending, you're in the way. So I think you got to sort of factor that in somehow. I don't know how you would do that.
Like what you do is you do this. You do a shot attempts, basically a shot attempts thing. You say, per shot attempt, who has the most shot blocked, and
percentage of the
percentage of shot attempts, how many are blocked, and that way you get a totally different number.
For this season.
Yep.
Of the top 5 teams that are blocking shots, only one is currently in a playoff spot, and four of the 5 are teams I think are in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. The only one who's high is Vegas. Yeah,
that I think that has everything to do with them. They just give up a lot of shots.
Yeah, right. Which I think is true. We do have to write that.
Yeah, well, I mean, all you got to really do is go back 10 years and look. If the worst teams in the league are always among the leading shot blockers, then you got to conclude that that's because the other team has the puck and they're always firing away.
Yeah, I mean, what's the last team to go to the Stanley Cup final that was like in the best shot blocker in the league? Based on percentage of shots taken too. So that has to be taken.
Yeah, that's tough. I can just go back in my memory. I mentioned Craig Ludwig. Craig Ludwig was on that '99 Dallas Stars team that beat Buffalo, and I blocked a ton of shots in front of Eddie Belfour. So, but I'm sure
he used to block a bunch for the Sabres in front of Brian Miller. I mean, they're guys who
didn't win a cup. They didn't win a cup.
They didn't win a cup, but and Miller and McKee got hurt, which is why they didn't win a cup.
Yes. Zorpic, Mac Niskanen, guys like that.
Yeah, it is really remarkable, just so people have an idea of how consistent this has been. This is the average shots against. Now, these are shots on goal, not shot attempts.
Right.
For the last 15 years. 31-3, 31-4, 29-8, 31-3, 31-3, 31-8, 30.1, 29-6, 29-8, 30, 29. Wow. I mean, it's very consistent of what teams have to face. That hasn't changed. The number of shots on goal is roughly the same. And even going back, like in the early 2000s, for about a 5-year period, it was like right around between 27 and 28 where it dipped. I don't no idea why that is. And then you go back before then, and then it was very consistent at 30 for a very long time. So,
wow. I mean, but again, you could think about that. Like, just let's play that out for a second. So, teams definitely want to get close to 30 shots on goal. If you're not getting 10 shots a period or something like that, your coach is going to be like, we're not getting enough shots on goal. Usually, like, you want to have at least a double-digit period. That seems to be what people get mad when they have less than 10 shots in a period.
Yeah.
So, so the coaches. So say you come in and you had like 6 or 7 shots in that period, then they're going to say, well, we got to put more shots on that. So you're going to start firing more and more shots, and that's why these averages are probably going to end up around 30 a lot, because at the end of the day, you're going to do that, right? You're going to keep, because you have to shoot to score, and you'll see that. So just start throwing everything on net. At which time more shots are getting blocked, but more shots are going to get through, but the quality of the shots aren't going to be as high. Which is like another thing about save percentage that I really don't like, is the fact that, Markstrom, has a bad save percentage. I watched some of his games and tried to see what the heck was going on with him too. He's also being hung out to dry on certain kinds of situations. There are goalies in this league that, just there are some super high quality chances, and that when those happen, it's like that's a different thing than a normal save percentage shot.
Well, it's weird. It's weird, Ek, because right now the same narrative seems to be being followed with both Alberta teams. Markstrom and Campbell are the high-paid guys who everybody expected to be number ones. And right now, I'm sure if you asked Woodcroft or if you asked Daryl Sutter, the number one goalies right now, right this second, are Dan Vladar and Stuart Skinner because they're playing better and they're playing them.
They definitely are. They're playing better. They're playing without pressure because they're not. The pressure on those other two guys is way more intense, right? And the other thing about is the goalies in different teams have different roles, right? Like Markstrom and Campbell, and even like Murray, teams that are offensively minded. Those goalies have to, it's okay for them to give up 3 goals a game because your team is supposed to score 4. You're supposed to score. It's a different situation, like for those goalies than it is for other goalies.
Yeah, but in Toronto over the last say 4 or 5 weeks with their defense being so injured. I mean, with Muzzin, Riley, and Brody just came back yesterday. They're playing more of a defensively responsible game. They've only given up 24 goals in 13 games, and they're 10-0-3 in those 13 games. So they're playing a different style. I think Markstrom and Campbell are being asked to cover up the defensive inadequacies of their teams, and they're being hung out. And it's surprising with Calgary because, that's a Daryl Sutter coach team that's supposed to be responsible defensively, and they haven't been. Edmonton, this is just a continuation of a theme. It's like they've hung out goaltenders to dry periodically over the last, 2 decades. I feel sorry for some of these guys.
Well, look about Marc-Andre Fleury with the Vegas Golden Knights, like when he was with them, right? They the same thing. I mean, they were playing all offense. He was giving up some goals, but the thing about Fleury was he was keeping them in games and he was making the big saves at the big times, but he wasn't like under 2 in his goals against average, but you need we always go back to the classic Grant Fuhr, right? Like Grant Fuhr, the classic example of this, like a goalie that can give up 5 as long as you score 6. That's what you need when you play an all-out offense. Like these teams are talking about who are the defensive defensemen on the Calgary Flames and the Edmonton Oilers. Like they're loaded up with offensive defensemen, right? So and their forwards are all offensive too. So when you think about it, you don't have any stalwarts.
More so Edmonton. I mean, Darnell Nurse is a very good 2-way defenseman.
Sure.
Cody Ceci is not a very good defenseman. They play him a lot, but guys like Evan Bouchard and Broberg and Tyson Berry, those are all offense first guys.
Defensemen. So look at what Campbell's just dealing with there. He's not dealing with people who are going to be picking up people, and it's just like and then a guy with whose confidence is shaky at best sometimes when he gives up a lot of goals, like we've been talking about. Campbell's in a spiral now. You can see like where it's coming from. It's not and then Skinner comes in there and Skinner's like, I'm not making $5 million a year. I can come in and just be whatever and I think, go ahead, Kev.
Well, but don't you think though that we're even though we label guys as offensive guys, and they certainly do take some chances, in today's game, you can't get away with being offense only.
No,
I don't care who you are.
No, that's true.
Like again, we had this conversation with Dylan Larkin, and he talked about how uncomfortable it was when he had a new coach, and you're having the video sessions, and he's the captain of the team, and Derek Lalonde is getting on him about his defensive zone coverage, and he said it was uncomfortable. So I don't care. I mean, maybe Makar has license the 007 to do whatever he wants,
right?
Whoever he needs to kill. But I think most of the other people, I think in the NHL, even if they're offensive guys, they have to pay the piper. Like when the next day they've got to address, why they took that chance. So I think your point is still well taken. I just think there's a lot more that, being an offensive defenseman today is a lot different than it was 20 years ago when guys just did nothing. Like what was that guy? Was a Tom Laidlaw guy who said there was no D and whatever the guy's name was. Now I can't even think.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
It wasn't Sandus Ozolinsh, was it?
No. But anyway, I just think everybody plays that. But the one thing that is different, and when you were discussing about being hung out to dry and making big saves when you are hung out to dry, we could never quantify that, but now we can. There's a save percentage with high danger, scoring chances, which is in that home plate area in front of the net.
Right.
So, I mean, you can actually go find that now where you can see how Markstrom's doing when he gets hung out to dry.
I'm going to, but it's still hard to quantify it because you can put that it's higher percentage, obviously harder. It should be a more likely goal, but then there's the play like where you're coming down a 2-on-1 and you're as a goalie you're playing the shot, which you're supposed to do, and your defenseman's just not going to pick up the pads. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean,
and that those kind of things can't be quantified. So that happens one time. Now your confidence every time you come in 2-on-1 or 3-on-2, now your confidence like I got to cheat towards that pass a little bit because that guy might not be able to pick it up. These are the things. These are what make goaltending always so fascinating to me. Like that mental part of the game is really tricky. And
but I think like last year, Shesterkin, his goals prevented above average factors in high danger scoring chances. Shesterkin had one of the best save percentages when you had those things where the expectation for scoring is much higher.
He's definitely at another level. There are definitely goalies that are.
But I mean, but it's all there. I mean, you can sort of get a look. Now, I mean, I completely agree with you that not all saves are equal, even in the high danger scoring areas. Because some you have zero chance,
right? And
that's going to be exactly the same as one where you can at least throw your glove up and it might hit it. Like the Dominic Hasek. So
right. Where Connor McDavid high percentage shot is different than than Travis Konechny high percentage shot.
Just to bring this full circle, when I was talking before about because scoring is up, right now, and next week we're 1/3 into the season.
Yeah.
So we're at I think Connor McDavid's at 27 games, and he's on pace for 70 plus goals and 158 points, which gets us into the Mario Lemieux territory. Now, do I think he'll be able to hit that? Probably not, because as Mike points out, and I think it's accurate, you start to play playoff hockey, and it used to be March, but could be February. The way things are going
after the All-Star break.
Yeah. So we could see that it'll be harder, but that's still remarkable. And one thing I would say is nobody's complaining. Nobody's complaining because we got offense. Except maybe goalies.
But it's fun and it changes. Go ahead, Mike.
The goalies union is complaining.
That'll be about it.
Oh, for sure. But it's fun hockey. I mean, and the skill level is insane. And that's the great thing. Like I like the NHL doing this new thing, like this new advertising campaign they're doing. Like the next great era is now, and I think they're right. I think they're absolutely right. Like it's one of those things that I think they kind of nailed it. And I know they've maybe said that other times, but.
I love that advertising campaign, but do I have to see Wayne Gretzky dancing on the ice after scoring the goal in Game 6 every?
Actually, you do. It's called a commercial.
But McKinnon, McDavid, Matthews, maybe Bernard. Who knows? I mean, it's like this era of and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Those are like the Mario Lemieux, Wayne Gretzky type guys. Then you have like that other era. You have like the Dale Howard-Chuck, Steve Yzerman guys who are at that next level. But you have where you have the Mitch Marners and those people who are at that right level, right below the superstars. We've got more of them than we've ever had. And it's just we are definitely in an incredible golden era. There's no two ways about it in my mind. It's just every team has somebody, and even some of the bad teams will have somebody who just you completely are. Wow, that guy's just got so much skill and so much talent. And I think that plays into it, less defensive defensemen. And also, we're sitting here blaming the defense, right? I think the forwards play less defense now than they've ever played, too. And that's another thing, this is a 5-man team on playing defense. Defense is a 5-man game. So,
you did mention a very good defenseman on a bad team that in the rumors.
Yes, nice transition, Mike. I like it.
Yeah.
Erik Karlsson, who rumors are coming up, and so yesterday Darren Dreger said he heard Edmonton later the car. And I love this. This is a fun one to follow. So Dreger says, "Yep, I hear Edmonton, and I'd heard Edmonton too, but so I'm not going to go against him. I heard Edmonton mentioned as well. But then Mark Spector, who is Mr. Edmonton, comes out and says that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. There's no way it could be Edmonton. Make it for me right now." And sometimes the worst thing to be is the most respected Edmonton guy because he is so connected to Edmonton that he might. And I'm not. I respect Mark so much, and he's probably right because you would probably be right by saying that Erik Karlsson is not going to get traded anywhere right now. But you're more likely going to be right than wrong. It's the easier side to take. So I give Dreger a little bit of credit because it actually is a rumor I was afraid to even put out there at times because it's like Because how would they do it? We don't know how they would do it. And it doesn't make any sense, right? Like the logic, they would have to get another team involved. There would have to be 2 salaries taken away somehow.
Yeah, but the problem is with that is if it was a rental situation, Kev,
Yeah.
you might be able to find a third team because the cap hit would only be for the rest of the year. We're talking about 4 more years with Carlson. And if it's 25%, we're talking in the neighborhood of $3 million. So, or a little lower than that. But I don't know, even Arizona is going to sign up for that unless they're getting at least a first round pick and maybe more. And that's tough. That's a tough sell.
If you do that, it's multiple picks. Yeah. Right, Kevin? I mean,
yeah, I just don't see it. Yeah. It's gonna be hard. You don't know, if a team really feels that it can make a run, who knows, what'll happen, because there's a lot of pressures on it that we don't really understand. But I don't see it. I really liked, I don't know if you saw this, but Elliot Friedman had, and I appreciate that Elliot Friedman always differentiates his rumors from his just, I think this makes sense.
Yeah.
And he had this makes sense, Besser for Anthony Mantha.
Yeah, I heard this.
And that has had so many legs because there is a lot of logic to it. And it is going to be interesting. And I don't think he would have mentioned it if someone hadn't said something to it.
I get that too.
Yeah. So I think there might be something. But, I thought Brian McClellan, who is a very honest man, and I always, sort out the guys that, you got to listen to what they say. Eisenman's one of them. You got to listen to what he says because he doesn't really lie about it. If he says, I'm usually more comfortable when I hire people that I know, you can count on that. Okay. And when Brian McClellan says, I'm not going to really do anything till I know exactly what's happening with Backstrom because obviously he's a big salary that we have on the long-term injury list. So I couldn't, make a big deal like that and suddenly have Backstrom say, hey, I'm coming back.
Yeah, by happenstance today, I was Tom Giletti, who works for NHL.com, tweeted out a video of Tom Wilson and Nicholas Backstrom skating. Now, that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean they're coming back in the lineup tomorrow. But if he's skating, maybe it's a possibility he comes back for the playoffs. Then you don't have to worry about cap ramifications. If he wants to come back in March, then you have to worry about it.
Yeah, no, but my point in all that is I've learned through the years, listen to what Brian McClellan said. I mean, he was totally honest about his goalies last year. I'm not going to do anything because I don't trust my goalies.
Right.
And he didn't. He didn't do anything.
Right.
Well, if he says I'm not going to do anything right now because I don't know what's happening with Backstrom,
then you can take his word.
Yeah, take that. That's
with Carlson. A couple more things with Carlson, real quick. One involving Toronto too. Other teams that I asked a couple. One assistant GM, 2 regular GMs about what they heard with Carlson out there, and they said that Washington had been mentioned. It was a team that was out there. And I think you're right, probably that Mantha is either speculated or something that he maybe knows and couldn't really say. But it's a good way of saying off the record is like, this is just my own speculation. That's a good way of saying something off the record too. But Florida, people keep saying Florida, and I just don't know how it can happen. Like we've talked about that at length.
Unless Bobrovsky's involved.
And the only thing I heard about that was Nabokov, who is interesting. So Nabokov, who is still very, very, is in the San Jose area. I know this. He's actually the coach of one of my wife's best friend's kids' teams, the big travel team, and he just still does stuff out there with them. Somebody told me that that he was trying to sell Bob on this concept of coming to San Jose, and I don't know whether or not it's a great place to go, like we've talked about before, but whether or not that's anything. Edmonton, Vancouver's an interesting one. Okay, yesterday I heard Vancouver. Not only are they trying to move Besser like we talked about, but they don't think the Horvat's coming back either next year.
Yeah, I've heard that as well.
So that's 2 names. That's 2. You heard that too, yeah. So that's something that's really that is interesting. So would Vancouver be interested in Erik Karlsson? That they're looking for defensemen in the biggest possible way.
Don't they have enough in terms of a questionable future with a Swedish defenseman with Ekman Larsson? You're going to put Karlsson. You're going to lump Karlsson in there too. Holy moly!
It's a different level than
I'm not saying he's not, but I'm just saying, I mean, this year is the first year that he has stayed healthy in 4 or 5 years, and he's top echelon. He's one of the best. He's going to make the Hall of Fame. He's won 2 Norris trophies. He's fantastic, but you can't ignore the injury history with him, especially making $11.5 million for another 4 years. That has to be the first thing on any general manager's mind when it comes to Erik Karlsson.
Yeah. No, I mean, it does have to be, and this is why it's not. But is Vancouver desperate? And should they be? I mean, it's as bad as we've said they've been. They're only like a couple points out of the playoff spot. I keep thinking about this. Like they've been like horrendous, right? But they're not horrendous. They're not like
but okay. I think that, and this is something that we have to track between now and the deadline. I think there are 3 centers that will be the focal point of a ton of interest. One is what we just talked about, Horvat. The other one is Ryan O'Reilly with St. Louis, depending on whether they're in the playoffs or not. And the other one is Dylan Larkin. But it sounds as long as Detroit stays in the race, I would think that they're going to keep Larkin. And I don't pick up that he's going to be like one of these deadline rental things. I think he's going to stay.
Yeah, I do too. That's how I feel about it. I don't know how they got here, though. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
Because it clearly it's got to be Steve Yzerman has dug in his heels on contract.
Yzerman says nothing, Kevin. Is it possible that they actually are working on something?
Yeah, it is, but I don't. I mean, because you just expect at any moment, though.
Yeah.
I just, it just feels to me like we're in a Forsberg situation where, Larkin feels there's a number out there that he thinks he deserves based on other players. Like Forsberg thought he should be paid like Yossi, and maybe at the end Yzerman will do exactly what Poyle did, which is offer him $10 million for the first 3 years. But
Kev, can we go back? Can we go back to Mantha for a second? Because I mean, you were closely observing him being in Detroit for as long as he was. A few years ago, when we were at the Centennial Classic, and he basically went toe-to-toe with Austin Matthews. I mean, he struck me as, oh my God, this guy's got so much talent. He's big, he's fast, he's got an unbelievable shot. He gets traded for Verana, and really he's done nothing in Washington. It's like, I don't know if it's just a bad fit, but he hits so much talent, and I just don't know where he's going now.
Yeah, I mean, he really just can't seem to have any measure of consistency with his effort. And he just doesn't really see it. Like he acts as if he doesn't get what people are saying, like the guy who thinks I'm putting in the same effort every game. But, he's clearly not, because when we've all seen him when he takes over games, like, he's just beastly. And he's big and strong, protect the puck. He's got a quick release and a dynamite shot. Like how many guys in this league, Eckwood brought up before about, can you beat a goalie long range? Well, you don't expect. Mantha can. Mantha can come over the line, be 40 feet away, snap a wrister, and suddenly it's in the upper left-hand corner. But he just doesn't have any measure of consistency whatsoever. None.
That's so funny. I mean, Tage Thompson had, I guess, the goal the other night that they said was the fastest shot that far. You heard, maybe saw that. I don't know if you saw that. It's the fastest goal. It was a wrist shot. Did you know that?
Yeah.
It was the fastest goal.
Well, there was a story somebody wrote it recently, and I think all of us in our observation, the slap shot is dying. Like we just don't see it anymore
because of the shot blocks, Kev. I mean, if you're trying to get a shot through, a slap shot's the least accurate shot you got.
Well, okay, the slap shot in terms of like Rick Vive coming down the wing, winding up and shooting, that's gone. The one-timer is a slap shot, but it's
but not really.
But not the way we're describing.
Not the way that it's described by hockey players.
Because
the connotation of the slap shot, not the actual mechanics of it. So
kind of a snapshot,
but it is just amazing that the kind of shots that players have to choose in order to try to get it through. Like Beck was saying, banking the ball like they're playing pool. Banking it on an angle, and
and no one does it better than like Connor McDavid. Like McDavid is brilliant at this. If you watch him do it, he'll bank it all. And Crosby and McDavid both will bank the puck all the time. They'll go behind the net and they'll throw it out front with 20 legs there, and they'll just throw it.
I just have to mention this before we finish the show because we didn't do a show yesterday, and Thompson scored the 5 goals on Wednesday. That was the greatest goal scoring performance, tied Dave Andrechuk for the record for Sabres franchise history, and almost all of the Buffalo fan base missed 4 of the 5 goals because Spectrum Cable in the Buffalo area was having satellite issues with TNT, who covered the game, and TBS. So on one channel, you had a graphic of Tage Thompson and Johnny Gaudreau side by side for the entire first period and most of the second, and they missed 4 of the goals and only saw the 5th goal. I mean, people who had DirecTV or Fios or were watching it on an app, they saw it.
He did that in 14 shots. And the other thing that's crazy is they took – not 14 shots, in 14 minutes.
14 minutes, yeah.
He played only like 4 minutes after he had the goal.
Well, they pulled back the dogs, and it's like that's great. But at the same time, I mean, I wanted to see him go for the record. Like,
he would have needed
that, right? It's like
hard. He would have needed 2 to tie Joe Malone. But he at least could have tied the modern record, which is Sittler, in 6 goals. Yeah. And apparently they played him 5 or 6 shifts in the third period. I mean, if I was a 3
or 4, yeah. Well, Connor McDavid, they did the same thing to him when he had his big night, if you remember.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, so but it's a shame because when I just did the Bernie Nichols book, one of the chapters had a discussion with Nichols' memory of sitting on a bench with Wayne, and Bernie had a 70-goal season, and he'd have 3 goals, and Gretzky would sit next to him, and he said, "Bernie, you need that 4th. You got to get that 4th. That 4th is an important goal. You got to go get it. You got to go get it as badly as you wanted it before." And Nichols, would go out. And he'd say, if I came back and I had 4, Wayne would get next to me right away, and he'd say, "Bernie, you got to have that 5th. The most important goal. You got to have it." And that's the way Wayne thought. If he had 5 goals, he wanted 6. Yeah. He had 6 assists, he wanted 7. And he tried to instill that in Bernie, and Bernie now talks about how important that was to him to hear that you got to want it. Like, you got to really, really want to be great. We seem to not have that now. We want to shut it down. We want to play Russian hockey when you get the lead and you shut it down and no more goals. So that's why Igor Larionov told me one time that Russian should never win the scoring championship because it goes against them with the idea of when you got the lead, score anymore. You just play defense.
Right, so you do, right? Yeah. Right, it is interesting, and then Gretzky's minutes weren't limited. I mean, he put up 225.
Yeah,
it's like, but I mean, as you're playing against, when you're playing against somebody like that, and they have 5 goals on you in the first period or first period and a half or whatever, and they pull them out. I mean, do you feel like that's something you want to happen, or do you feel like that's something that I don't know, like.
Yeah, I'm torn about it because I'm really kind of a sportsmanship guy. On the other hand, I like big record nights. And, when I watch football games, for me, I don't know why. Ever since I was a kid, I love it. I want teams to put up 70 points. Because they never, whenever they get on a roll, because it always seems like they get into the 50s. In college football, you see it all the time. And then they back off,
Back off, right, yeah.
Like we don't. And I say go. Go get that 70.
Yeah,
I want to see 70.
5 touchdown passes or 300 yards rushing. Like things like that you've seen, like they're so rare, right? But they happen.
Yeah,
I'm with you on that. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, because the problem is now it's hard. Like we'll use just football as even hockey as an example. The 9-8 games are rare. So if you had if you had a guy that had 6 goals, the team doesn't need that 7th goal. And that's the problem. So.
I mean, this isn't youth sports. Like to me, that's what I think. You need to. I think if a team can't stop, running up a score in professional sports, I'm not for it. I mean, I'm not against it. I'm not against it. I think it's
Well, Jeff Merrick was talking about this yesterday and had an interesting point, and I agree with it. Is the fact that game was on TNT. That game was on national television in the U.S. And the NHL should have a problem with the Sabres sort of shutting it down. I mean, how many, like, all I know is, like, I wasn't particularly watching that Sabres game, and then I saw Tage Thompson scores 4 goals in the first period, and I immediately went to TNT, and that's when I found out it was frozen.
Yeah.
And I'm probably not in the, I'm sure that a lot of hockey fans would have said, okay, I got to watch this. And they shut it down and not allow him to even try to get a goal in the third period. I'm sorry. That's the NHL should say, don't do that. People want to watch records being broken. Everybody goes to watch a perfect game or a no-hitter in baseball.
Right. Yeah, the problem is you really can't have that conversation. Bettman can't,
I know.
It's called the Sabres. But your point is well taken, Mike. I agree. And I'm torn a little bit on it, like I said, because I'm kind of a sports with honor type guy. But on the other hand, I like, like I just told when you were off there, I like 70 points in a football game. When a team's trying to rout it, I think that's a magic number to me. Give me 70.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's dishonorable to score. Like, okay, if you don't want him to score 5, if you don't want him to score 5 goals, stop the friggin' puck. Elvis Merzlikins and Jonas Korpisalo couldn't stop him.
Yeah, although haven't we all watched sporting events where guys are trying real hard and they're just so overmatched that and then
like you're talking about like Team Japan versus Team Canada in the Olympics. That's one thing,
right?
But we're talking about professional NHL players. These, the Blue Jackets will beat the Sabres the next time they play them. You know what I mean? It's not like
that could.
They probably will. I mean, like we talked about before, whenever a team gets blown out, they win the next time those teams play like 70% of the time.
The goaltending, the goaltending was sorry. The goaltending was so bad in that game that Korpisalo started. They put Merzlikins in, and then in the third period they put Korpisalo back in because Merzlikins was so bad. That's how bad it was.
Yeah.
I don't know why, and I feel bad about this because he's done nothing to me. But I really developed a dislike for Korpisalo as a goaltender. I mean, not that I don't like him personally, but I just feel like the Blue Jackets are at a disadvantage when he plays. Like, he just seems like a below average goalie to me.
It's funny when you watch him. I agree with you. And you know who is like that too is the guy I always talk about is Francouz on Colorado.
Yeah.
Like, you can watch 2 different games with both those goalies. Like, you can watch a game where both of them look like they're really, really, really good. Like, and then you can watch a game where you're just like, they are not NHL ready.
I have not. I have missed all the games when Korpisalo has been really, really, really good.
The 5 overtime game in the bubble.
I haven't because he stood on his head and beat Toronto in the bubble in the playoffs 2 years ago.
And the game against Tampa, 5 overtimes, he was unbelievable.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're right. I mean, since then, I haven't seen much either. All right, it's all the time we have for today, folks. Have a great weekend, everybody. Enjoy the games. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. And have fun. Get your holiday shopping done. Get out there. You know, do.
Boy.